Okay, well, I was hoping that we would have a few more people join, and we probably will over the next couple minutes, but since we're recording it, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started on the presentation, and hopefully we'll get a few more people in. But by a show of hands, I guess, kind of in the chat, I just wanna make sure that everybody can hear me okay. You wanna just like let me know in the chat that everything's working well. Perfect, thanks guys. Sweet. All right, awesome. All right, so as we're doing our little presentation tonight, I have some slides I'm going to share with you, and I have some topics that I just kind of want to discuss that I've sort of set up already. But if there's something specific that you have a question on, you want to ask a question, you go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can at the end. And you can also ask those questions live as well too once we get to the Q&A portion as well too. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tiffany. I'm the owner of Terra Loco, and tonight what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be talking about shoes, which is what we do at Terra Loco. So what we're going to be doing is sort of talking about like what are the different types of shoes, how do you choose a different shoe for, and how do you kind of make the right decisions for the right shoe for you. And it's kind of a complicated process, or it can be, but Terra Loco tries to make it as easy as possible. So I'm just going to kind of go over all of that with you, what our process looks like and the kinds of things that we're looking for in the right pair of shoes for you, as well as some kind of frequently asked questions. And then, like I said, we can, depending on what time it is, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the presentation. So give me just 1 second here. Okay, wait a minute. Sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. What do you mean? Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Okay. Sorry, I don't know why it has this weird button, this weird notification that I've never seen before that says sharing is paused, but clearly you can see it. So, okay. All right. Again, leave a note in the chat if there's anything else that you guys want to discuss as we kind of go through this presentation. So, all right, so shoes 101, what are we talking about today? All right, so let's talk about what the fit process at Terra Loco looks like. And essentially what our fit process consists of is sort of four different steps. And so the first step, of course, is going to be asking questions. All of our staff are really good at asking the right kind of questions, and we kind of know the right kind of things to ask. A lot of experience in fitting shoes for people. But the first step is going to be asking questions, finding out more about you, about your injury history, about what you're going to be using the shoes for, and so on. Then we'll do the gait analysis. We can either do the gait analysis on the treadmill, so we'll do a video gait analysis where we have you run on the treadmill and record your feet, and that's kind of what you're seeing in the top left-hand corner there, is sort of an idea of what the treadmill gait analysis would look like. Another way to do the gait analysis is to do a walking gait analysis, and this is probably just as useful as the video gait analysis, but what we would do is we have you take your shoes off and then you walk away from us and towards us. We kind of look at your arches, have you stand on one foot, do some squats, a couple other things, and then just sort of see what is happening with your feet. Slides aren't changing. Oh my gosh, why? Okay, hang on a second. Just a second. Okay. Carla, are we back on the correct, are we on the correct screen now on the fit process? Hopefully. Oh my word. Technology. All right, slide 2. Great. Okay, fabulous. All right, so fit process. Ask questions with the gait analysis. And the next step then is going to be the experience. And so this is really probably the most important part of what we do at Terra Loco. It's bringing out all the shoes for you to try on and really just get you in the shoes and have you run around the store, have you run on the treadmill, have you walk a little bit, just really get a feel for the shoes and decide, kind of which one is sort of ticking all the boxes for you. And then the last step, of course, is going to be the confirmation process. We'll make sure that we are giving you the best suggestion for your feet and based on the things that you've told us about in the question asking portion. And, our job is to make sure that you're in the right shoe. So, sometimes we do have to say, I don't know. I mean, I know this one is maybe you like the way this one looks a little bit better than the others, but the other ones, that's definitely the better option for you. And so that what we'll be doing in that confirmation process, checking the fit, making sure the size is right, making sure everything looks okay, and then going, yeah, I feel comfortable making this recommendation for you as the right shoe for you. So that's kind of the fit process. So let's talk about what we're actually doing then, in each of those parts of the process. So the first thing we're going to try to do is match the shoe to the activity. So this is part of the question process. So when you come in, we're going to ask, what are you using the shoes for? You might be using the shoe for running, and we have lots of running shoes, of course, and we have lots of runners that come to the store, but you may not be a runner. Maybe you're using it for walking. Maybe you just need a good, comfortable pair of shoes to just wear around the house or at work, but maybe you're using it as a gym shoe. Maybe you're doing some trail running. Maybe you're taking a dance class or some sort of other fitness class. Even like we've had people come to us for team sports like basketball, volleyball, that kind of thing. And, or if you're using it for hiking, something like that. So those are the questions we're going to ask. What are you using the shoes for? The reason we ask this is because the outsole, so that's the bottom of the shoe, the outsole, the midsole, that's kind of the middle portion that's usually white that provides the most of the cushioning. And then the upper, of course, the part that kind of encompasses your foot. Those all differ depending on the type of shoe that we're in, and they're all designed for different activities. So for example, obviously on a hiking shoe or a trail shoe, you're going to have a more aggressive outsole, a little stickier, grippier rubber on the outsole. And so that may not be appropriate for a gym shoe, but definitely is something you're going to want for a trail running shoe. Same thing with the upper. Think about the upper in that if you're going to be using a shoe for, let's say, a dance class or some sort of a class at the gym that requires a lot of side-to-side motion, you're going to want a shoe that has an upper that's a little bit more structure, that's going to provide a little bit more of that side-to-side support so that you're not going to slide off the shoe while you're doing those side-to-side motions. So that's why we ask those questions. It's important to note that you can wear a shoe that's not designed for your activity, but there's a couple things to keep in mind. The first one is probably that it's just not going to last as long because it's not designed for the purpose that you're using it for. So for example, if you're, doing trail running and you don't really want to invest in a separate pair of trail shoes and you're using your road shoes for that, it's perfectly fine. You can do that. But, when you're using your road shoe on the trail, it might get torn up a little bit quicker. It probably won't last as long. And then same thing in terms of like side-to-side motion. You can use a running shoe for that side-to-side motion for those gym classes, things like that. But it's just probably not going to last as long because a running shoe is designed for that heel to toe movement, whereas a cross trainer or something designed for a fitness class is going to be designed for a little bit more of that side-to-side motion. And then finally, you can use the same shoe for multiple purposes, but, know that the shoe's not going to perform the same when you're using it on one surface versus another or doing different motions. And so that's kind of what we just talked about. So again, it's just important to keep in mind that, I know that not everybody can afford to have multiple pairs of shoes for every single activity. And in an ideal world, that probably would be what you would do. But that's just not, feasible for most people. So yeah, you can use the same shoe at the gym, on the treadmill as you're using for your gym fitness class where you're doing some side-to-side motion. But it's probably not going to last as long as if you had a shoe specifically for that gym class and then a shoe specifically for road running. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at trying to decide what type of shoe to get. But those are the questions that we would ask to make sure we're making the right recommendation for you right at the beginning. All right, so what's the next step? The next step is the gait analysis. So as I talked about, we'll either do the running gait analysis on the treadmill, or we'll do a walking gait analysis. And in either case, what we're looking for is whether you're pronating, and if so, how much. And essentially pronation is sort of the act of that movement from sort of the outside or sort of the strike to either the inside or the outside. So in the graphic that you see here, you can see the neutral foot there in the center. And that person's foot doesn't really rotate much one way or the other as they're running or walking. But when you go and you look to the one to the left, you can see the pronation and then the overpronation. Now, most people pronate to some degree. You're going to see a little bit of that rotation to the inside. But when we get all the way over to the overpronation, which you see on the far left-hand side of the graphic there, that is where we might start to see injuries. This is where we might start to see issues like plantar fasciitis or ankle pain or knee pain, things like that, because kind of the mechanics of the way that your body is functioning isn't working quite right for the activity that you're doing. And so we have neutral, we have pronation, we have overpronation, so kind of on that left side. There's also supination, which not that many people actually do, although a lot of people think that they supinate, but not many people actually do supinate. Most people are going to land on the outside of their heel, and most people are going to do that no matter what, whether you're a neutral or pronator or supinator. Most people are going to land usually on the outside of that heel. And at that point, if you continue to roll to the outside, that foot stays on that outside portion of the foot. And as you can see in that graphic over on the right-hand side, that over supinator is really rotating out. And so when you look at those lines, you can see how much stress you're putting on your joints when you're running or walking, when you don't have the right shoe to support your feet for what they're doing. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you're actually getting a gait analysis of some sort, either through us at Terra Loco, or maybe going to Active PT or another physical therapist who is able to actually take a look at what your biomechanics are and make a recommendation for the right type of shoe for your foot. Now, most people, I'd say probably 60% of people are in a neutral shoe, maybe 40% of people then going to be in a stability shoe. Stability shoe is designed to correct for that overpronation. So what a stability shoe does is it pushes back against that rotation to the inside and helps push that foot back into that more neutral position. So essentially, a stability shoe is designed to prevent that overpronation and push that foot back into, or guide, I guess I should say, that foot back into a more neutral position. Now, if you're a supinator, you're over supinator, there really isn't a shoe designed to push from the outside back to the center. So if you are a supinator, what you're going to really want to look for is you're going to want to look for a neutral shoe. If you are a supinator and we put you in a stability shoe, what'll end up happening is you'll over supinate even more, because now the inside of the shoe is built up, the medial side of the shoe is built up to help prevent for overpronation, but you're not actually overpronating. Instead, you're neutral or supinating, so that support on the medial side is going to end up pushing that foot over to the outside and create that more over supination. So again, that's why it's really important to match the foot and your gait to the right type of shoe. So we ask the questions, find out what type of shoe you're looking for, what you're going to be using it for. Okay. Then we do the gait analysis, and this just helps us figure out what category of shoe to put you in. Are you a neutral shoe? You need neutral? Are you stability? Or maybe you need something in between, which we call a guidance shoe, which basically is a light stability shoe. So once we get you into the category, we know what category of shoe we're going to put you in. Then there's the next step. So different shoes for different feet. Stability and neutral, that's not the only question we have to answer. And so the next bit is sort of that experience process, trying on the shoes, actually feeling how the shoe feels on your foot and really understanding how it's going to work for you over the long haul. So we have a feel part. So there's a lot of different types of shoes that are using different materials and different foams and things like that are going to make them feel a lot different. So these are just some examples of the types of different shoes that we might pull for you. And again, based on the questions that we asked at the beginning, we might pull one of these things more than the other. But you can have a shoe that's really flexible, or you might have a shoe that's really firm and doesn't flex much at all. You can have a shoe that's really cushioned, really soft and squishy, or a shoe that's really responsive. So it has a lot of spring back. It feels a little bit more, it gives you a little bit more energy return as opposed to soft and squishy. And then the shape of the shoe as well too, in terms of, rocker bottom, like you might see from Hoka, or a traditional shoe like you might see from Brooks or New Balance, so forth, or some sort of a roll where some shoes just have a little bit more roll in the very forefoot of the shoe, very, very off at the toe off. So then when you get to that kind of toe off part, you can feel that shoe really want to propel you forward. But some people just don't like that feel. So you have a couple of different types of feels to like the sort of roll that a shoe will offer. And then you also have the drop on the shoe, which can make a big difference for both injury prevention, comfort, and also efficiency. So you have anywhere from a 0 drop shoe all the way up to a 10 or a 12 millimeter drop shoe. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means so that you guys can understand that a little bit more. And then, of course, you also have the high cushion versus minimal cushion. So when we talked about cushion versus responsive, that's sort of like the feeling of the cushioning that's there. But you could have a responsive high cushion shoe or a responsive minimal cushion shoe, and so on and so forth. So a cushioned high cushion or a cushioned minimal cushion, right? So you could have a shoe that has a really soft feel, but just not a lot of actual stack height to the cushion there. Or you could have a really responsive, firmer feeling shoe, but has a really high amount of stack. And so those shoes are going to feel very different. Then you've got the fit part. And this is probably the most important part of finding the right shoe for you, is getting the shoe, and sometimes it's a brand that fits your foot the best. So, whether it's a narrower heel, wider forefoot, higher volume shoe, meaning that there's more room within the shoe, like top to bottom, whether you're a narrow, regular, or wide width. So we do carry widths in a lot of different shoes. And then whether you're low arch or high arch. So again, you want the arch to fit well with your arch, but you also don't want an arch to be too high. A lot of people confuse arch support with stability. And while arch support is important, you definitely don't want to have too much arch support. So if you're standing in the shoe and you can really feel that arch pushing up into the arch of the shoe, pushing up into your arch, it's probably too high, and it's probably going to cause problems down the road. So you just want it to feel sort of like the arch is sort of cradling your arch, not pushing up on it. And then, maybe a wider midfoot, so kind of the middle part of the shoe where the arch is, or getting something that's going to fit an orthotic a little bit better. So something that'd probably be a little bit wider and have a little bit more volume. So as you can see from the 2 slides that we've done so far, we can, we have the type of activity that you're using. So we narrow it down there. Then we have the stability that you need, narrowing it down a little bit further. And then we can narrow it down even more from there into the type of feel that you want out of a shoe, and then finding the right fit for you. So I said we were going to talk about heel to toe drop. It's also called offset. So you'll hear it called either one, heel to toe drop or offset. And so basically all this means is it's the difference between the stack height of the heel, so the amount of cushion in the heel, and the amount of cushion in the forefoot. So this is actually a really good graphic that shows you really well what that means. You see that in the Brooks Ghost, you have a heel height of 24 millimeters and a forefoot height of 12 millimeters. So that means there's 12 millimeters of difference between the two. That makes it a 12 millimeter offset shoe. The Kinvara, on the other hand, has the 23 millimeters in the heel and 19 in the forefoot, which makes it a 4 millimeter offset. But the probably the most important thing to remember here is you see how the heel height, the cushion height in the Brooks Ghost in the heel is 24 millimeters, and the cushion height in the heel of the Kinvara is 23. So there's really not a big difference there between the actual amount of cushion, honestly, in the shoe. You can also see then that the forefoot height, 19 versus 12, you actually have more cushion in the forefoot now of the Kinvara because of that lower drop. So it's kind of an interesting idea in that, it can change the way that you run. It can change the efficiency. A lower drop shoe can sometimes help you land more midfoot, whereas a shoe that has a higher offset, like something like the Brooks Ghost, a more traditional shoe, is really designed to maximize the cushioning in the heel to offload your impact when you're landing on your heel. Whereas a lower drop shoe is going to be a little bit better for somebody who is trying to midfoot strike. And also, so for me, for example, I have a bunion, I have some arthritis and metatarsalgia in the toes and in both feet, but one more particularly. But if I wear a shoe with a higher offset, like something like that Brooks Ghost, you can kind of think about it in sort of like a high heel, essentially. Like, so you have a 3-inch heel, you have a 2-inch heel, you have a 1-inch heel, you have a flat, right? In a Ghost, something like a Ghost with a 12 millimeter offset, I feel like I'm wearing a high heel. It's putting pressure on my forefoot, on my toes, on my bunion right away, even when I'm just standing there before I even go out for a run. So for me personally, a lower offset, a lower drop shoe actually works much better for me. It doesn't put as much pressure on my bunion, doesn't put as much pressure on my toes. And it also it helps me run a little bit more efficiently. But a low drop shoe is not for everybody. It's definitely something that can cause injuries if not done properly, especially if you go to something like a zero drop shoe, like something from Altra. You need to kind of ease your way into it. So, although I'm saying things that makes it sound like a lower drop shoe is definitely the way to go, it's definitely not for everybody. And it's definitely something you're going to want to work your way into if you do decide to change into a lower drop shoe. Okay, so next we have, I want to talk a little bit about sort of, the differences between brands and the differences between shoes within those brands. And so this is kind of an important takeaway, I think, from all of this, in that on the left, you see the brand comparison. So the Brooks Transcend, for example, is their high cushion stability shoe. The Asics Kayano is their high cushion stability shoe. But those two shoes feel so incredibly different that just because you always wear the Asics Kayano does not mean that you could just automatically go into the Brooks Transcend. Every brand is going to have a stability and a neutral shoe and some, varieties within those. And sometimes you're just going to like one particular brand over another, and that's totally cool. But you might also find that trying different brands is helpful to just give your feet a little bit of something different every time you go out for a run. Again, a New Balance 860 versus the Mizuno Inspire. Again, very different feels, very different fits in terms of the type of cushioning. Brooks Ghost versus Saucony Ride, those are both neutral mid-cushion shoes. Brooks Ghost is a gel cushion. It's going to feel softer, it's going to feel squishier, whereas your Saucony Ride has a more responsive feel underfoot. So again, one type of shoe, just because there's kind of an equivalent in another brand, does not necessarily mean that that is going to be the best option for you. You definitely want to try them on, and some people just really like one brand over the other. On the feel comparison side, again, just because a shoe is a neutral shoe within a brand, maybe that you like, that does not necessarily mean that they're all going to feel the same or that they're all going to work the same for you. So for example, we have the Brooks Ghost, the Brooks Ricochet, and the Levitate. All three of those shoes are neutral shoes. The Brooks Ghost uses gel cushioning. It's softer, squishier. The Ricochet and the Levitate both are using a different type of foam entirely in their midsole, and so it feels springier, it feels more responsive. They call it their Energize line, and so those two shoes, even though they do fit into the same category of shoes, are totally different, are going to feel a lot different as well too. So again, that's why you come to some place like Terra Loco, where we can actually talk you through these differences and make sure that we're kind of matching the right shoe for your particular needs. My last kind of bit on this particular slide is to not rely on recommendations by friends and family. We very often have people come in and say, my best friend wears the Asics Kayano, for example, and she says that's the best shoe and it fixed all of her problems and that's the shoe I want. Well, it may have fixed all the problems for that person that was not wearing the Kayano before. Maybe she needed a stability shoe and she wasn't in one. Now she's in a stability shoe and that fixed all of her problems. But if you need a neutral shoe and you go into a stability shoe, you're going to cause yourself problems. Now, the other kind of line I have here is sometimes your doctor, and I want to make sure that I have that little parentheses or asterisk there, because of course, you know, there's definitely plenty of doctors and plenty of PT people that know shoes and make really good recommendations. But we will often have somebody come in and say, my doctor told me I need a New Balance shoe, and that's it. Not whether they need stability, not whether they need neutral, not which New Balance shoe. And that doesn't really tell us anything about what we're trying to do to fix the particular problem that you're having. And so that's just something that we need to, you know, it's can maybe kind of an old school feeling of, you know, a lot of people have always associated like Asics and New Balance with, you know, kind of the best running shoes or the best shoes for people with difficult feet. And I think that's probably why we get a lot of recommendations from doctors on Asics and New Balance. But again, within those two brands, there are just so many styles that, you know, just knowing a brand doesn't help us at all. And in fact, because different brands fit differently, your foot may just not fit into a New Balance shoe very well. And so if we can know what type of shoe we should be in, whether it's a stability or neutral, that gives us at least a place to start. So that is probably the best thing that we can take away from a recommendation by a doctor, a PT or something like that is, you know, what category of shoe should we put you in? And then from there, we can try on all the different shoes and make sure that, you know, where the fit is right and everything. But we don't want to just rely on, you know, some recommendation for a particular shoe for you, you know, based on what worked for somebody else. Okay, so the last part then is that confirmation process. So we want to make sure that the size and the width is right and that the shoe is actually doing what we want it to do. So when you put the shoe on, we'll continue to watch you walk. And sometimes like I'll put a shoe on somebody that I'm like, oh man, this is going to be the best shoe. This is going to be perfect. Going to fix all their problems. They put the shoe on, they walk 3 steps and I go, nope, this is not right. It's just not going to work for your particular gait, for the way that your biomechanics work, for your, you know, arch or whatever the case may be. Even though it ticks all the other boxes, it just really isn't the right shoe for you. And we'll tell you that. We'll say, nope, that's not right. Let's move on to the next one. The other thing that we need to really pay attention to is the size of the shoe. So most people, and this is crazy, but most people wear their running shoes at least a half a size, if not a size too small. And that's because we typically find people wanting to wear the same size in a running shoe that they have been wearing in a dress shoe for their entire life. And we find that a lot of people will pick a size when they're young, and that's the size they just continue to wear no matter how much their feet change over time. Something important to maybe, you know, point out is that if you are pregnant, if you gain or lose a lot of weight, if you have particular injuries, that can totally change the shape of your foot, the size of your foot, and the type of shoe that you actually need to go into. So those are things that we kind of need to make sure we're evaluating all the time. You do want to make sure you have a little extra room on the end of the shoe. Your feet are going to swell as you run. And the more you're running, the longer you're on your feet, the more your feet are going to swell and the more extra room you're going to want to have in that shoe. And the last point on this slide that I really wanted to point out was that the proper fit may depend though on the activity and really is unique to everybody. We will definitely have people that just like a tight fitting shoe. They don't want to feel any extra room in the shoe at all. And sometimes we just have to go, you know what, if that feels right to you, great. But, you know, again, also in terms of depending on the activity, the proper fit. So myself personally, if I'm wearing for my trail shoes, I like them to fit a little bit snugger, only because I don't want that sort of side to side or forward back motion as I'm going up and down hills or around corners and things like that. I find that a shoe that fits a little bit larger, like I would fit for road running, is actually kind of sloppy for trail. So it's just really depends on the brand as well too. And every brand's going to run a little differently. And depending on the style of the shoe too, from one year to the next, the fit can change. We're definitely always going to want to check that. All right. The next thing I just wanted to mention to you guys is a couple of new brands, and that if maybe you haven't checked it out, we have just started carrying On Cloud, which is a brand new brand to us, and I think we might be the only place in town that carries them. Personally, it's not quite the right shoe for me. They have a higher heel to toe drop and they run a little bit narrower. So it's just not right for my particular foot. But we have a lot of people that have been really liking it. It has a very kind of explosive propulsion based feel to it. And so definitely check that out next time you're in the store. And if you haven't tried Altra, Topo, or Hoka before, those are definitely brands that you might want to check out next time you're in. Hoka is definitely one that we sell a ton of. And as soon as I turn off my screen share here, I'll show you a couple of shoes I have sitting beside me so we can, I can show you the differences on there. But I guess the important part on this slide is don't get too set on a particular brand or particular style, because if you don't try something new, you'll never know if something else will work better for you. All right, so lastly, I just wanted to cover a couple of frequently asked questions that just come up a lot. And then I'll open up the floor for your questions as well too. So how do I know if I picked the right shoe? So we've kind of talked about some of the things that will sort of guide you through the process to make sure that you're in the right shoe and sort of make the right recommendation. But at the end of the day, of course, it's ultimately up to you and what feels right. So usually what I tell people is that the best shoe for you should feel like you're not wearing a shoe at all. So you don't want any pressure points. You don't want anything poking, prodding, rubbing weird. It should really kind of feel like a slipper, like that shoe is sort of molding to your feet. Like we talked about the arch earlier, that is definitely what you want to make sure you're not feeling, that arch pressing up into the arch of the shoe pressing up into your arch. You're going to want to make sure that, it's being cradled, but not pushing up too high. So again, the right shoe for you should really feel like you're not wearing a shoe at all. And when you put that shoe on and you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing, that's usually the right shoe. This is another frequently asked question. What's the best shoe for insert injury here? Usually people are asking about plantar fasciitis, but sometimes it's other questions as well, or other injuries as well. And the answer to this particular question is it depends, which I know isn't a really good answer. Most people just want to have a quick and easy solution, but the reality is that plantar fasciitis can be caused by multiple things. It could be overuse. It could be that you're not in enough support of a shoe. It could be that you're in too supportive of a shoe. Sometimes, and to be honest, a lot of times it's just that the shoe's worn out. It maybe was the best shoe for you at the beginning, but you put way too many miles on it, and now it's just not functioning the same way anymore, and it's creating an injury. So what's the best shoe for whatever injury you have? Well, this is where we come to Active PT, other physical therapists, your doctor. Between all those people and us and the suggestions that we can make and the questions we can ask, that's where we figure out what the best shoe for you is for your particular issue. And it's really going to change depending on the person, depending on the injury, depending on the functionality of your foot, and so on. And then the last question, how long should my shoes last? Well, typically we say shoes should last between 300 to 500 miles. Not everybody actually keeps track of their mileage, and that is really kind of a broad range as well too, because when you're in a more minimal shoe, you're probably going to be in that more 300-mile range. When you're in a more maximal shoe, like Hoka, you might be in that 500-mile range or even maybe longer. If you're, 110 pounds, your shoes are probably gonna last longer than somebody who's 250 pounds. If you're always doing your running on the treadmill indoors, that shoe is gonna last longer than if you're doing your running outdoors. So again, it just really depends on what you're using the shoes for and your particular gait and so on. But 300 to 500 miles is sort of a good range. And ultimately, your feet will tell you if your shoes need to be replaced. So that's kind of the key takeaway there is if the shoe has worked well for you and then all of a sudden something starts hurting, things just don't feel the same anymore, you're starting to feel injured in some way, that is probably a good indicator that it's time to replace the shoes, even if it's maybe a little bit before that kind of 300 to 500 mile range. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to show you a couple of the shoes that I brought here so that I could just sort of talk through a little bit more about the different types of shoes and the cushioning and the drop on stuff. But this would be a good opportunity for you guys to ask questions as well too. So make sure that you put them in the chat if you do have any questions. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to, there we go, okay. So go ahead and put any questions that you might have in the chat. Here is a Hoka. And one interesting thing about Hoka is you can see that it has this maximum cushion. And you can also see that it has a lower heel to toe drop. So most Hokas are a 5mm drop. So that actually gives it, more of a midfoot strike feel than your typical running shoe would have. You can also see it has a lot of curve here and here. So it's going to have a little bit more of that rocker bottom. That's totally a matter of preference. Some people love it, other people hate it. And that is just the Hoka way. Every time somebody comes in and asks to try on a Hoka, I'll tell them, well, people either love them or hate them. You just have to try it on. So now people who love them, I love them a lot. But you can see that it definitely has that max cushion. So you're going to have tons of protection, especially, even up here. And it's a little stiffer. So this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about flexibility versus a firm shoe. This shoe doesn't bend a whole lot in the front. So then for me personally, with my metatarsalgia and bunion and so on, putting pressure on that joint, having to bend those joints and push off creates some issues for me. So here with that stiffer shoe that isn't going to actually bend at that joint and instead is just going to roll me forward, that keeps all that pressure off of my toes and actually is really helpful for preventing injuries for me personally. So that's the Hoka. And I wanted to just point out, so my apologies in that. So this was a brand new clean shoe that I've actually never worn because I got it right before I messed up my ankle in August. So this one looks great. This one I've actually been wearing, so it looks terrible. But this is a Topo, and Topo is another one of those brands that's kind of unique and interesting. It doesn't have a traditional running shoe feel like your Brooks or your New Balance and so forth. What it does have is it has this foot-shaped toe box. So for an example, comparison. Here is a New Balance and here is the Topo over here. So you can see that the New Balance comes to a little bit more of a point. The Topo has that foot-shaped toe box, so more square in the front, gives us a little bit more room, a little bit more width in the forefoot without actually going to a wide shoe. And personally, the reason I like Topo so well is it really has a nice, grabs the heel really well, gives you good arch support, and but still has that nice wide toe box that I personally need. This particular shoe, the Phantom, now, again, since I put miles on this, it's a little more flexible than it would be right out of the box, but it is a little bit more of a stiffer shoe again as well too, with a lower heel to toe drop. So this is another 5mm drop shoe, which is funny, right? Because this is a 5mm drop shoe too. That looks like it has so much more cushion, and technically it does. It has more stack height, but the drop on these is the same. But again, on this one, you have that stiffer toe. And again, for me, this works really well for my plantar fasciitis, or I'm sorry, for my bunion and metatarsalgia on the toes. So Topo is a brand that I really like personally, and has been a really high growth brand in the store lately. Another brand that's kind of a similar one is Altra. So now again, these are quite old actually, and they probably need to be thrown out, to be honest. These are trail shoes, so you can see the difference of the lug design here on the bottom. So you have a lot grippier outsole. So again, that's what we're asking those questions for. But Altra has that foot-shaped toe box again, so that more square shape here. And all of the Altras are going to be a 0 drop. So no difference between the heel and the forefoot. Personally, again, I really like a 0 drop shoe or a lower drop shoe, and Altra is another really high growth brand for us, but that is just another example of a different type of shoe with that more square toe box. Now, personally, I find that Topo fits my feet just a little bit better. And that's typically why I go with Topo over Altra, not because I don't like the 0 drop. I do like the 0 drop. And I have a pair of 0 drop Topos as well, but the shape of the Topos just tend to fit my feet better. So that is again where that fit really comes in and is really important to make sure that we're getting the right fit for the shoe. And a lot of that just really depends on your foot, the shape of your foot, and so on. So these are 2 brands that personally, this is what I wear. And then I just wanted to show you something because I was thinking about the cushioning, the different types of cushioning, and how, you know, they're responsive and or squishy and so on. And so what I did was I brought, this is the New Balance 880. This is a neutral shoe. It's kind of their mid cushion neutral shoe. And I also have here the Saucony Ride, which again is their mid cushion neutral shoe. Now, I've probably worn this maybe a little bit more than I have this one. So again, there's, you know, going to be a little bit of breakdown in the cushioning and the midsole on this one, a little more there than on this guy. But I'm going to see if you can actually see this here in the video. So when I take this shoe, squeeze it, hang on, make it a little. Trying to make it so you can see. So if I squeeze this, there, that's better. So if I squeeze the shoe together, you can see how much compression is happening on that midsole. So you know, it's a really soft, it's gonna have a really squishy ride. So even though this shoe and this shoe fit into the exact same category, if we're gonna put them on a chart side by side, they'd be comparable shoes. Let's look at how this shoe squishes. So now if I try to squish this midsole in, it doesn't squish at all. Hardly squishes at all. Saucony's cushioning system is just a little bit different versus a foam. And here you have a slightly different type of material that's being used. It's a little bit more responsive, feels a little bit springier, not as squishy. Sometimes, you know, more cushion is good, but not all the time. And so again, that's something that, you know, some people come in thinking that, you know, more support, more cushion, that's always the best option. And that's not the case. It just really depends on your personal preference. So personally, I like a firmer feeling shoe. So again, that Topo that I showed you a little bit ago, that one's much firmer. And I like that type of shoe personally over a soft squishy shoe. So like, for example, Asics tend to not, and Brooks even, which is our most popular brand, tend not to work very well for me because they're just too soft for me. I just don't like that feel. But it's really just a matter of preference. And again, don't base it off of my suggestion, you know, don't base it off of your feet, what works well for you, and the suggestions that we can bring to you. Do not base your shoe decisions off of what somebody else is suggesting or what somebody else's favorite shoe has been. Or most importantly, probably, do not base your shoe selection off of color. That is definitely something that is, you know, getting better. I think not everybody is, you know, as focused on color anymore, but it's definitely something that's still a concern for a lot of people. And it's really a frustrating thing for us when we know that this is, you know, this type of shoe is the best shoe for you, and somebody's choosing a different shoe just because of the color, because they like the way that it looks. You're going to only set yourself up for problems down the road if you go based on what the shoe looks like versus what the shoe feels like. That's ultimately the most important thing. So that is kind of what I had to talk about today. If you want to, you could turn your video on and you can turn your mute, you can unmute yourself. You can ask questions if you have any questions, or you can throw them up in the chat as well too. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have in a little bit of time. So any questions? I think you're all still there. One question that has come up is whether how the shoes, like what our return policy is, or like how you know, how you can decide if the shoe is the right shoe for you if you're only trying it on in the store. That's definitely a good question, right? Because if you're in the store, it might feel awesome, it might feel great, you might be like, this is the most fabulous shoe I've ever put on my feet. You could take it home, run 5 miles on it, and go, I don't know what I was thinking, this is awful. And if that's the case, you can still bring it back to the store. We can do an exchange or store credit if we can't find the right shoe for you at that time, if you've worn the shoe. Now, of course, if you haven't worn the shoe, we will do we can give you a full refund on your shoe, but we really want to make sure that it's the right shoe for you. So if it doesn't work, we want to hear about it and we want to make sure we can make it right. Any other questions? No. Okay. All right. Well, there's going to be people that are going to watch this at home on the recording once I get this posted. And I'm sure we'll probably have more questions afterwards. So if you have additional questions that you want to ask that we don't get to, you can definitely post that in any of our, Facebook things and on the event as well too. And we'll definitely answer those. I did see another question. Yes, custom orthotic. Yes. Okay. So that's a good question. If you do have an orthotic that you want to, that you're planning on wearing in the new shoe that we're fitting for you, you definitely want to bring it in. We want to make sure that we can get the orthotic into the shoe for you. And depending on how thick that orthotic is, we may need to go up a size. We may need to go with a more high volume shoe to make sure that we can get that orthotic to fit. There is a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of question here as well too, in that we will sometimes have people come in that say, I'm getting a new orthotic and they're making it for me and I'm picking it up on Friday or whatever. I'm here to get a new shoe. They want me to bring my shoe in so that they can fit the orthotic. And the people that do that, so Layers and Limb Lab, they prefer that you have the shoe and they'll cut the orthotic to fit the shoe. It's a little tricky in that, if you already have an orthotic and then we need to fit the shoe to the orthotic. If you're getting a new orthotic, then we can fit the shoe properly here at the store, and then you can take it to Layers or wherever it is that you're getting that orthotic made, and then they can cut it so that it'll actually fit into the right shoe. So it kind of depends on whether you have something, but if you have one, you're planning on wearing it in the new shoe, you definitely want to bring it in because we want to make sure that it fits right. All right, any other questions from anybody? All right. Well, my dog is making a racket over here, and I think he wants to go outside again. So I'm going to go do that. And I will definitely get this video up so that you can watch it again if you want, and for sure ask questions. We're going to have more educational talks going on over the next couple of months. This is something that I want to try to do every few weeks. So in a couple of weeks, we'll have a talk on what do we have coming up? So we'll have a talk with Active PT on running form that's coming up. We have a trail running talk that's going to be coming up, and we'll have a nutrition talk that'll be coming up as well. I feel like I'm missing something, but those are all going to be on our Facebook page under our events. You can see those. They'll all be virtual for the time being until we can meet in person again. But make sure you join us for those. And again, those will be recorded as well too. So if you can't make it, that's fine. And we will make sure that we get to as many questions as possible on any of those. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let us know how else we can help. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.